Have you ever stood in a crowded room and felt more alone than when you were by yourself? Not because people ignored you, but because no one seemed to speak your language anymore. It's subtle at first. You notice your reactions start to shift. A joke that once made you laugh now feels empty. A conversation that used to engage you now feels like static. And before you can name it, a distance begins to grow between you and the world you once knew. You're not broken. You're awakening. There comes a time in your inner journey when the noise of the world no longer satisfies the song in your soul. Small talk drains you. Surface-level connections feel hollow. And the more you tune into your own frequency, the more out of sync you become with the familiar rhythms around you. It's disorienting, isn't it? To look around and realize you've changed. This chapter of life doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It arrives quietly. In missed calls you no longer feel guilty about. In invitations you politely decline without over-explaining. In moments when silence feels more nourishing than company. It's not isolation, it's transformation. The truth is, your inner world is expanding, and the rooms you once fit into now feel too small to hold who you're becoming. So let's begin here. Not with shame, not with fear, but with reverence for the quiet distance within. Because that distance, it's where your new self is making space to grow. There's a kind of sadness that arrives not through loss, but through change. The kind where the people you once laughed with now don't feel as close. Where shared jokes feel dated and shared values no longer shared. You sit across from someone you've known for years. You sip your coffee. You smile at the right times. You nod. But inside, there's a quiet ache. Because while they're speaking, you're remembering who you used to be to fit in that space. How many times did you shrink a little to stay connected? How many truths did you withhold to keep the peace? And now here you are, awake in a different way. Not better, not superior, just further along on a path they don't yet see. You don't blame them, but you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what your soul now knows. So you begin to walk with a new kind of solitude, not the lonely kind, but the kind that says, I need more than this surface. And maybe you wonder, why is no one walking beside me anymore? But the answer isn't rejection, it's alignment. Because awakening often clears the room before it fills it again. Because sometimes your silence isn't distance, it's depth. And sometimes losing people isn't a failure, it's space being made for truth. So breathe, let the grief come, let the goodbyes echo. Then remember, you're not being abandoned, you're being recalibrated. There's a moment in spiritual awakening that feels like hunger, but not for food, or comfort, or even company. It's a hunger for truth, a quiet craving for something you can't name but deeply feel. You start to notice the layers of small talk, pretense, masks people wear just to get through the day. And suddenly you can't do it anymore. You can't pretend that shallow conversation satisfies you. You can't laugh just because you're expected to. You can't keep nodding along when your spirit is whispering, this isn't real. So, you pause. You start saying less. You observe more. You choose silence over noise, not because you're cold, but because you're seeking something warmer. This hunger, it can be isolating. It can make you feel like you're hard to reach or difficult to please. But the truth is, you're just tired of settling. You've outgrown comfort that costs your peace. You've outgrown friendships that don't hold your soul. And here's where the shift happens. You start to become what you've been looking for. You begin speaking your truth, even if your voice shakes. You begin creating space for depth, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You stop chasing connection and start embodying it. Because what you're really after isn't more people. It's more presence, more meaning, more real. And the most beautiful part, when you begin to live this way, the world starts responding differently. Not louder, not busier, but deeper and truer. There was a time when you thought being too sensitive was your weakness, when tears embarrassed you, when your deep feelings made you feel like an outsider, when people told you to toughen up and part of you believed them. But now, something has changed. You've started to understand that your sensitivity isn't a flaw. It's a signal, a tuning fork guiding you back to your truth. You feel things others overlook. A glance, a tone shift, the energy in a room before a word is even said. It's not just emotional, it's sensory, it's spiritual. At times, it overwhelms you. The noise, the chaos, the unspoken tensions. You might find yourself craving quiet, not because you're escaping, but because your nervous system has been on high alert for too long. But here's the truth. Most people never say, your sensitivity is not something you need to fix. It's something you're learning to navigate. Like a musician learns to tune their instrument, not to mute it, but to play it well. So you start honoring your boundaries. You give yourself permission to leave the room before you're drained. You choose gentler people, softer routines, slower mornings. You stop trying to explain why you feel so much. You stop apologizing for needing time alone. You stop forcing yourself to match energy that never felt good in the first place. And gradually, your sensitivity becomes your strength, because it lets you sense what matters. It connects you more deeply to beauty, to love, to God, to peace. You start seeing it for what it really is, a sacred compass, pointing you not away from life, but deeper into it. There's a kind of loneliness no one warns you about. Not the kind where you're physically alone, but the kind where you're surrounded by people and still feel unseen. You might be sitting at a dinner table, smiling politely, nodding along to stories that once made you laugh, but now feel like echoes in a life you no longer live. It's not that you've outgrown them. It's that you've outgrown the version of you who used to pretend everything was okay. You've stopped faking the small talk, stopped laughing at things that don't feel funny, stopped dimming yourself to fit into a space you've already outgrown. And so, you feel the ache of no longer belonging where you once did, but not yet knowing where you belong now. That in-between is sacred. It's the cocoon between who you were and who you are becoming. It's the pause between breaths. The moment the caterpillar dissolves before the butterfly takes form. You may feel like something is wrong. But what if nothing's broken? What if this ache is not loneliness, but the echo of your soul calling you home? You're not missing people. You're missing depth. You're craving resonance. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's also honest. And honesty always clears the path, even when it hurts. So if you're in that quiet, strange space, if you're wondering why even your happiest moments feel hollow, breathe. You're not lost. You're simply done pretending. This is not the end of connection. It's the beginning of real connection. With others, with peace, with yourself. Have you ever walked into a room you used to love, and suddenly everything feels too loud? The voices, the lights, the rhythm of conversation that once felt familiar now moves like static over your skin. You haven't become distant. You've just become attuned to something quieter, deeper, something that doesn't live on the surface anymore. You notice how certain jokes don't land in your body the way they used to, how your laughter feels borrowed, how your smile feels strained as if it was stitched on to keep things comfortable. It's not judgment, it's awareness. You've outgrown performances that used to earn you belonging, and now you crave something else. Not more people, not louder parties, not busier calendars, but spaces that match your internal stillness. Places where you don't have to shrink to be included, where your softness is welcome, where your silence is not mistaken for distance. This discomfort, you feel, it's not rejection. It's your nervous system asking for peace. It's your energy outgrowing the noise. It's not about abandoning people. It's about returning to yourself so deeply, so honestly, that only alignment is allowed to stay. You're not hard to please. You're just done pleasing at your own expense. The more you rest in your truth, the more you realize the rooms you feel too big for were never designed for your whole self. And you deserve to take up space that fits all of you without apology, without shrinking, without noise. There's a particular kind of ache that comes not from being alone, but from being surrounded and still unseen. It happens when you share a part of yourself, a thought, a feeling, a truth, and what returns is misunderstanding, deflection, or polite discomfort. You start to learn which parts of yourself are too much for the room. So you tuck them away. You soften your voice. You sand down your edges. You laugh when you feel like crying. You listen when you long to be heard. And over time, you become fluent in shrinking. You become so good at protecting others from the weight of your truth that you forget what it feels like to speak without apology. But here's what no one told you. Being misunderstood doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've grown beyond the language others know how to hear. You're speaking in textures now, in subtleties, in sensations, in honesty that can't be diluted for comfort. And not everyone will meet you there. Not everyone will hear the tremble behind your smile or recognize the courage it takes to show up fully. But some will. The ones who've also stopped translating themselves to be palatable. The ones who can sit with your silence without filling it. The ones who see your depth as invitation, not inconvenience. You're not hard to understand. You're just finally being true. Let that be enough. Even when the world doesn't clap. Even when the room doesn't respond. Your truth is not a performance. It's a homecoming. And your soul will feel it long before anyone else does. There comes a moment, soft, almost unnoticeable, when the mold you used to live in begins to crack. It doesn't shatter all at once. It fractures in quiet places. Like when a conversation that once thrilled you now feels empty. When a job that once validated you now drains you. When a friendship that once held you now asks you to keep pretending. You start feeling too big for the space you're in, but also too unsure to leave it behind. Because outgrowing isn't glamorous. It's uncomfortable. It's messy. It's lonely. You're shedding roles you once clung to for safety, identities that earned you approval, patterns that made you predictable. But you're also stepping into a version of yourself that hasn't fully formed yet, one that doesn't have all the answers, one that isn't polished or praised, one that is painfully real. And in that in-between, you question everything. Who am I without this mask? What do I believe when no one's looking? Where do I belong when I no longer fit where I used to? These questions don't arrive to punish you. They come to unearth you, to strip away the noise until what remains is quiet, but unmistakably you. You are not falling apart. You're falling inward. And the discomfort, that's just your soul making room for what's next. You were never meant to stay molded. You were meant to become. There's a particular ache that comes not from being alone, but from being surrounded and still unseen. You speak, but your words land like raindrops on glass. You try to explain, but they only hear the echo of who you used to be. You share something real, raw, trembling, and it's met with confusion, silence, or worse, dismissal. It hurts, not because you need their approval, but because you once needed their understanding to feel safe. But now, here you are, growing in directions they can't follow, and it feels like grief. Because you realize not everyone will walk with you where you're going. Not everyone will recognize the version of you that's emerging. Some will love the chapter you were, but not the one you're becoming. And that's okay. Let that be okay. There is beauty in being misunderstood, because it means you're no longer explaining yourself to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. It means you're finally speaking from the truth of your soul, not from the scripts you memorized to be liked. And yes, it will cost you things. It may cost you relationships that once felt like home. It may cost you a seat at tables where masks are required. It may cost you your old self, the one who lived to be accepted. But it will give you something deeper. Peace. The kind that doesn't ask permission. The kind that doesn't shrink to make others more comfortable. The kind that stands alone in silence and feels whole. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You only need to be true to the one who finally understands you yourself. At the end of all this, after the solitude, the sensitivity, the shedding of friendships and illusions, what remains? You, not the version that pleases, not the one that performs, not the one who tracks every tone in the room just to feel safe. No, the one beneath all of that, the version of you that always existed before the world told you who to be. The one who is allowed to sit still, to not have answers, to not always understand why it hurts or where it's leading. The one who breathes deeply and trusts the inhale, even when the next step is still unknown. This is what the journey is really about. Not becoming someone else, not reaching some higher state where nothing touches you, but coming home softly, slowly, tenderly to who you already were before you were afraid. To that childlike part of you who knew how to play without needing a reason, who felt the breeze and smiled without analyzing it, who cried without shame, who loved without calculation. That part of you isn't gone. She's waiting, not in some distant future, not after another book, another breakthrough, another act of fixing. She's here, now, and all she wants is your presence. So let this be your permission. to release the loop, to stop replaying the moment they left, to stop performing for healing, to breathe, to feel, to be. Not perfect, not enlightened, not fixed. Just fully quietly present. Because in the end, peace was never somewhere to reach. It was always something to remember. And now you do. Welcome back.